a reason, because there's objective third-party evidence. This isn't staff wishing. This is the university's paper. It has some rigorous analysis within it and based on that and an opportunity, what was viewed as an opportunity to do something positive and constructive for the health and benefit of our staff, which has to be that's got to be day one concern for the manager and the management team in that department, and it is, and accordingly we brought it forward for that purpose. I appreciate why you would not want to be broadsided, and one of the things we are working on overall as a management team is providing you with more frequent communication and better communication. I think you'll see that bear out as the year goes on and as time goes by. Certainly, finance has 3 reports on the agenda today. If we continue to offer better communication, then there'll be fewer surprises. I am happy to apologize for if this was a surprise, then that is the fault of the management group. But the fact of actually bringing it forward towards you, I make no apologies for that. I think that was good management. I think it was the appropriate thing to do. I appreciate it's a difficult decision for this council, but you're very good at making difficult decisions, whatever it is you happen to decide. So if we didn't communicate well to you that something was coming, then that's on us and specifically on me. But I do think it was right to bring it forward, and I stand by that decision. Thank you.
Anything further, Councillor Brown? No, not at the moment. Okay, thank you. Councillor Oliver, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I don't have a lot to say. I did support the recommendation last week, and I'm going to support the recommendation again this evening. I would remind my fellow councillors that this is a capital budget item. So we didn't deal with this in January. We should have dealt with it back in October when we were dealing with the capital budget. So between October and June is a substantial period of time. I stand to be corrected, but I believe we were told by the manager that we've had this piece of equipment on a trial basis for about 6 months or so, 4 months. So, Mr. Mayor, again, there was an opportunity to bring it in as a piece of test equipment at the time when they brought it in. And so for that reason as well, I thought, while I agree with my colleague completely, it's unfortunate and it shouldn't happen, but it did. It was a capital budget item, not an operating budget item. An opportunity to get it while we've had all our paramedics trained on it. And so the time to act, I felt, was when they brought it forward and is now if we go ahead and approve this recommendation. It hurts us at the time. Obviously, it's a budget amendment that we hadn't planned on. It's a lot of money. Nobody questions that. But I think under the circumstances, I agree with what the county manager said. I think they were almost obligated to bring it forward to us. If we as a council chose not to approve it, we could have done so. Committee last week recommended it. I think we should go ahead, bite the bullet, and get this project underway. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Black. We are speaking to a motion for approval as printed in your document.
Some weight to it, yes I do, but I've put more weight to the fact that this is going to improve our service for the residents of Norfolk County. It's going to make lifting safer for both the EMS and the patients that are being lifted. I think it's just a better service all the way around, and there's more need for it. The biggest cohort, the age cohort, is actually, I think, my group, the last time I looked at it, and it's huge. So there's more and more service required in healthcare and the use of EMS. It's going up, not down. So anything that we can do to improve our service for both EMS, to reduce costs, and make it a better service to the people that are using it. So I'm going to support it.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Well, I'm getting to him. I have questions for him. You might be giving me the answer, so I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Johnson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to address the funding question,
That's my
that
question.
was asked earlier by Councillor Height. I did some research into the WSIB reserve, and we've contacted a couple other municipalities. I looked at the bylaw. We also contacted our auditors, and I am satisfied that the use of that reserve for the stretchers is not unreasonable. We do use that same reserve for other WSIB claim preventative measures, such as our health and wellness initiatives. So it's not a stretch to use that reserve. Also, the other thing that we would do is, because this is an initial purchase, we would use that reserve for the initial purchase. This is a new item. It's not identified in our 10-year capital forecast. So we would use this reserve for that, and then, because we do have an EMS reserve to purchase ambulances, for the replacement of these stretcher assets, we would use the ambulance reserve going forward, 7 years from now, to replace the assets. And in the reserve policy, which will be coming in a couple weeks, we would identify in that policy, once we identify a new capital asset that's funded from a reserve, we would also have to identify the additional contributions to that reserve in the operating budget, because the last thing we want to do is to end up where we are today and end up in a deficit situation with our reserve. So we would be proactive. If we're going to be using a reserve to fund future asset purchases, well, we better make sure there's money in that reserve. So all that is being looked at, researched for future items such as this. However, for this issue with the stretchers being purchased, using the WSIB reserve is appropriate.
Mr. Johnson, while you are on this topic, my question is, using the WSIB reserve to help fund this, the amount of the tax levy portion is $165,000 off of this year's budget of 2017, which was not budgeted in our operating. The tax levy would be capital tax levy, would it? Yes. My bottom line question is, of the $165,000 in this motion that is to come, if this is approved from the tax levy, what is the new figure if in fact some of that, if not all of it, is now going to be funded from the WSIB? Does it reduce the WSIB contribution, reduce the $165,000 tax levy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I might have to ask you to repeat that question.
Okay, if I can, just quickly, 50% of the cost of these 6 stretchers is $330,000 to be raised here from Norfolk County. Half of it, according to this motion, is to come from the EMS Vehicle and Equipment Reserve, the other half from tax levy. I'm wondering with the WSIB, if some contribution is going to come from there, is it going to affect the tax levy portion of 165? Or is it going to make up the portion of the EMS reserve, vehicle reserve?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so first of all, the motion with the ambulance reserve, when that motion was made, we were looking into using the WSIB reserve. So really, that motion should say the WSIB reserve.
That's what I'm looking for. So we will change then, the project be funded from, instead of the EMS vehicle and equipment reserve, it just simply say WSIB. That's what the clarification I'm looking for is which of those two figures are affected. Thank you. Any further debate on Councillor Columbus and Councillor Oliver's resolution? Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Now hearing that we can take this money from the WSIB fund, do we not have to change this wording on the motion?
I just did it.
Oh, so it's a friendly amendment or a friendly change?
Well, it's just...
Because Black is the mover of this motion, is he not?
Well, I have on this Councillor Columbus and Councillor Oliver, so that's what I have to go by, the written motion. The motion was separated from last week, so it's not the same mover and seconder necessarily from the council and committee that is here tonight. Last week, we only needed a mover. We didn't need a seconder. So Councillor Black moved it. But tonight, we need a mover and seconder because it's separated, just like we need a mover and seconder for the balance of the report.
Okay.
Okay? So we're in order. Councillor Brunton.
Just some clarification. Are you saying none of this will now be out of the tax levy? Am I reading that right? Or it will be?
165, if you look at the third paragraph, and further, that the 2017 stretcher replacement program project be funded, so it says it should be from the WSIB reserve in the amount of 165,000 and from the tax levy in the amount of 165,000.
So it's still tax levy?
Yes.
Thank you.
And the reserve, well, yeah, okay. James?
Just further clarification, tax levy, however, that is the 50% we'll be getting back from the province.
So the 165,000 from the tax levy portion will come back from the province?
Through the mayor, correct, and this is a capital project, so really your levy isn't directly hit. It's more of an accounting exercise when it comes to capital assets.
I understand it's coming from capital. I don't understand why we're getting that money back from the province.
So through the Mr. Mayor, 50% would be funded from the province over the life of the asset. So in this case, it's 7 years. So they would give us $165,000 over 7 years through our claims to the province. The other half is being funded from the WSIB reserve.
So I've read this wrong, or from last week. You're now telling me that the 6 stretchers in total are 330,000. No, there you go. I had that wrong. My apologies. Now I get it. Councillor Brunton, please.
I'm glad you do, because I don't. I am asking this question, what will the impact be on this year's tax levy with that $165,000 this year?
For this year, when it comes to the tax operating supported budget, there will be no impact.
No impact.
Any further discussion? Councillor Height?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I need that cleared up here, because
Go ahead.
If you're writing it off over 7 years, there's a hit at some point because you don't get the check until the end of the year. Is that not correct?
Through Mr. Mayor, because it's a capital project, we pay for capital projects through different means other than the tax operating budget. We contribute to reserves through the tax operating, so we could argue in the 2018 tax operating budget, we would increase the reserve contribution to the particular reserve that we're going to be replenishing these projects going forward.
So really that's what we're going to do is put the 165,000 into reserve.
On a cash basis, yes, we're definitely spending that money. But if you're comparing what our taxpayers pay based on our 2017 tax operating budget, that's how we set up the tax bills, and that's the number we use. Capital projects aren't included in there. Reserve contributions are, and similar things like that. However, this is a capital project, therefore it's indirectly hitting the taxpayer, but in a different form of accounting.
Councillor Wells?
I am just ever so pleased that I attended this evening's council meeting, because for 16 years, I have sat here, over there, in this chair, and only heard that we don't have reserves, our reserves are low, and now all of a sudden, our reserves are just wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I will call the question. Those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, I think it's in camera time. I would like to go back to section 4 on the front cover of your agenda. Oh, no. I'm sorry. My apologies. I was looking in the wrong spot. I have another resolution that has been pulled. My apologies. It hasn't been moved or seconded, so I didn't realize it was on deck. This is for the Talbot Gardens seating repair, and this is, that was number 2. Is this 19? 11. Number 11, okay. This is a motion for the temporary shoring of the bleachers. I do not have a mover or seconder. Councillor Black?
Mayor Luke, I would move it.
Do I have a seconder to get this on the floor? Pardon? You can second it. Moved by Black, seconded by Brunton, that this report, CSD 1717 Talbot Garden Seating Repair, be received, first of all, and that council authorizes our Community Services Department staff to be exempt from the purchasing policy in order to complete the shoring and barrier installation by September the 15th of this year, and further, that council authorizes staff to proceed with temporary shoring of identified bleacher sections, the installation of a bleacher barrier, and destructive testing at an estimated cost of $90,000. And further, that the approved 2017 capital budget be amended to include $90,000 for Talbot Gardens seating repairs, with funding to be provided from the general building reserve. And further, that council authorizes staff to submit a further staff report in August 2017 on the results of the destructive testing and an estimated cost and methods of backfilling the identified bleacher sections for council consideration. Discussion. Wells and Brunton, please.
I just have a question. I see it's coming out of the general building reserve. Could I ask our treasurer how our general reserve is? Building reserve? Healthy? Non-healthy? Because this is wonderful. I'm so glad that we have so much money.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have the exact figures with me, but I remember looking at those last week, and I believe that's an unhealthy reserve.
Unhealthy. Councillor Brunton, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I was the person that asked for this to be pulled. And I have some concerns, and if you recall last week, I asked our manager, Mr. Cridlin, to provide a breakdown of the $90,000. I don't know if you got that with you, Bill. I could have some of those. I don't know how many reviewed that on their computer, but I wanted to go over that. At the time, my main concern was that the coring shouldn't be very expensive based on the $90,000, and if you see the estimate, If you look at the estimate, it's $12,000 for the coring. And I think this is a very important part of the process here. And I have a great concern with this facility. And again, I'd say it's probably I don't know, an $8 to $10 million facility to replace, I'm guessing. With that, it's probably one of the largest arenas in Norfolk County, if not in the area, seating-wise, and it's just a great facility. But anyway, my concern is maybe not to do on the overall estimate here, but the coring is very important to find out where we're going with this facility. I've talked with Mr. Cridlin, and the way he spoke, and I'm sure he could speak tonight on what his thoughts are and how this breakdown will proceed, but the cost estimate to set up the barriers throughout the arena so people can use the bleachers, to me is, I feel it's the wrong message we're sending to the public. The arena, the hockey tournaments that people come to look at are one of the most important things for selling our community. They stay in our motels where they have a hockey tournament, they eat in our restaurants. All these things are very important. To have them come in and see plywood blocking off sections of that arena, what kind of message are we sending to them? They're going to ask, oh, geez, maybe we shouldn't even be in here. Something wrong with this place? Well, yeah, there is something wrong, but we have not fixed it. And I guess and again, Mr. Cridlin indicated to me that he would, Bill, if I may, hold off on putting up that barriers in the sections of the arena that will prohibit people from sitting in certain areas until we have done the core testing. I would hope that this thing can move along very quickly. And the shoring, I'm not quite sure. I hear mixed signals on the shoring, whether it's temporary for 1 year, 5 years, I'm not sure. So I would ask Mr. Cridlin if you could maybe go over this again and explain, not just to me, but the rest of council, where we're going with this and how long it's going to take.
Certainly. Through Mr. Mayor to County Council, when staff put this report together, we were looking at working with our user groups, working with the community, working with staff, working with council to get Talbot Gardens back to some seating. As I said last week, there wasn't a lot of clear direction from council as far as the repairs. The report in April had put the repairs off until this fall when we had the RFP closed and we had a better idea where we were going. So staff came up with this as intern to get close to 400 seating in this arena and get it back from just not a practice facility but something that people could use. So you do bring up a good point, Councillor Brenton. If we would start with the testing, and the testing is some coring, some cutting, and then replacing what we take out. With that information, the engineer at that point will have his information on what is needed, the cheapest way to fix all the seating. However, we weren't sure with council break, we wanted to make sure we were ready for September 15th, and that's why we came up with a barrier, because we didn't have direction to fix everything because we don't have numbers in the method to do that. So maybe it is kind of a chicken egg thing. We will start with the testing. Once we'd have that, then we'll have a good idea on how to fix the rest of the seating. And perhaps, I'm just thinking here, we could aim to bring a staff report back to the first sitting that council has in August and expedite everything, and at that point give you more information on either you want to fix the rest of the seating or it's too expensive, and then we put the barrier up to keep people off it. Does that help explain?
Well, it doesn't help the situation. I guess you may have explained it, but may I ask you a question? The shoring you refer to, who determined that? The engineer, and how did he determine those sections had to be shored? Did he do any coring on those sections previously?
Through the mayor to county, or to Councillor Breton, when he did a secondary investigation, He came to these spots which have a concrete floor below, so he has a solid base where shoring would hold the bleacher sections up. So he's recommending shoring there, and then these sections are, the report does call it a temporary fix. However, a temporary fix could be 5, 6, 7, 8 years. He just said, we'll come back in a yearly inspection as long as the posts are straight, nothing's moved, we're good to go, and like I said, it can be a 5 or 6 year fix.
But that shoring was all based on just his visual inspection of the facility, no coring of those sections.
That is true. It's the 4-inch top lift that he wants to cut apart the core and get information off of that.
Even in the areas where it's going to be shored?
At this point, that is correct.
Okay. Well, Your Worship, I support the motion, I guess, but I would like to see a little bit of time delay from the time the coring takes place to determine whether we need to stick plywood all through that arena. Thank you.
I see your point. Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As sometimes happens around this table, I'm going to take the opposite perspective to my colleague that just spoke. To me, the part of the motion that I felt was most justified was to authorize staff to go ahead and implement the shoring of the either end section, and where the walkabout around the perimeter would allow up to 400 people to go back in that arena starting the middle of September 2017. And I think that's what that was going to accomplish. The shoring would allow immediate occupancy again this fall by spectators up to the number of approximately 400. And I remember Mr. Cridlin clearly saying if we did that, we could probably use that temporary fix for the next 4 or 5 years. While either one of two things happened. We either budgeted for the more major repairs, which the coring and testing would determine how to do, or we'd make the decision hopefully in the next 12 months as to whether or not we're going to go with the community hub concept and no longer worry about Talbot Gardens as a long-term arena in the town of Simcoe. So I fully supported the temporary work once we were told it could be done for $45,000, I guess, which was a reasonable number. The $14,000 for the bleacher barriers, I presume, Councillor Brunton, it's going to be more than plywood, because that'd be awfully expensive plywood for 14 grand to barricade those certain sections, and I'm only being a bit facetious. But I reluctantly will continue to support the whole motion, but I think spending $21,000 on destructive testing and confined space entry work, which I think has to be done more related to the coring than the shoring, that's the money that I feel is not well spent right now until this bigger question is answered, excuse me, in the fall of 2017. But I will be supporting this motion to, at the very least, get the work done that will allow people to start going back in there this fall on a temporary basis.
Any further discussion? Okay, I read the motion, so you're certainly aware of what it says. I'll call the question then. Those in favor of supporting the motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Mr. Cridlin, I know that I don't have to say this, but I'm hoping that you will keep us informed along the way.
Through the mayor, yes, no, that's a true statement. We may start work as early as next week.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brunton.
Well, the other question I had too, and again, I'm not disputing it, but we've also asked when you come back with those results that the engineer will be here for questioning.
Through the mayor, Councillor Brunton, that is correct. He's agreed to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on, please. I'm going back to page 1 now, finally. I'm back on track here. This is the second half of a closed session. I got it. What's that? There's 4 to do, yeah. We're going to do this first. Okay. That was the way we outlined it at the beginning, so. It's been moved by Councillor Brunton, seconded by Councillor Columbus, that council convene in closed session at 6:30 PM pursuant to sections 239D and B of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, as the subject matter pertains to personnel matters respecting identifiable individuals, including employees of the local municipality or board, and labor relations or employee negotiations, and an ongoing investigation respecting the municipality, a local board, or a municipality controlled by the ombudsman, appointed under the Ombudsman Act, and an ombudsman referred to in sections 223.13, section 1 of this act, or the investigator referred to in the section 239.2, section 1, 2014, C13, Schedule 9S, 22. Those in favor? Carried. We will now go into closed session, please. Now I'm reading every period. I've learned that one. And nobody's gonna,